أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Verily, our praise is due to Allah. We praise Him, we seek His aid, and we ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of our own selves and from the evils of our own actions. And whomsoever Allah guides, none can misguide. And whomsoever Allah leaves astray, none can guide back to the correct path. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. We testify there is no deity worthy of our worship except for Allah, who is alone with no partnership, and never has and never will be another. And we bear witness that Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, is the last and the final prophet of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters, friends and family, everybody tuning into the live stream, and everybody joining us in the Zoom meeting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we'll be continuing on our Sunday discussion, which we should be conquering about half of the entirety of the book itself, but continuation of the Exquisite Pearl, which is written by Sheikh Abd al-Rahman al-Sadi, which is a journey to Allah and the home of the hereafter. As we had touched base on last week, this book is based mainly on a poem that was written by said Sheikh. And the translation for that is given, and then we see an analysis and a breakdown of that, of stations and how to we take this poem and the advice that it's giving us to be able to put ourselves to a certain degree of uh, basically of action or possibly even inaction or strengthening of our faith to be a point at which we're able to increase our means of our imam and reach the sense of ihsan, of certainty, conviction, and acting as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if you can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though He is of the unseen. But as I was mentioning from the previous week, a good way for us to start off is to begin with that translation of that poem, so we can refresh as to what's being narrated, and then we'll be breaking down each section and the certain stations, as mentioned, and how to achieve them. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. The translation of the poem is as such. Bismillah. Fortunate are those who avoid the destructive paths, intending the stations of Allah's good pleasure, those who journey with the utmost sincerity, following the legislation by which faith is measured, those who build the stations of their journey, submitting between being fearful and being hopeful, those whose hearts the divine has filled with devotion to Him and love for the most merciful, those who remember Him and do so abundantly in private, public, at all times in continuance, seeking nearness to the sovereign master by obeying him and forsaking disobedience, doing what is obligatory and optional is their way, inspecting their own faults and their deficiencies, their souls patiently enduring all that is disdainful, disastrous, desirous of what it entails on benevolence. They arrive at a station of contentment, ultimately reaching the garden and safety. For his bounties to his creation, they are grateful with their heart, tongues, and their limbs of their body. Reliance is their companion in all affairs while striving in the pleasure of the All Merciful, worshiping the divine, believing in his presence, thus taking their place at the station of excellence, advising others to that which pleases their Lord with knowledge, guidance, and compassion, accompanying the people in bodily form, whilst their spirits dwell at a sublimer station. They alert creation to their complete need for Allah, continuously fearing a decrease in their faith, their hearts turning away from all distractions, completely emptied of other than the most merciful. Their movements, concerns, and their resolves are all for Allah, not creation nor the devil. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reach these stations, inshallah. I mean, but the first section that pops up here as we start tackling into this poem here is first and foremost the awakening. So realize that what is intended by worship, ibadah, is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have gnosis, ma'rifah, of him, to love him, continually turn to him in repentance, and to traverse the paths that lead to the abode of eternal peace, Dar as-Salam, or the Jannah. Most people are overwhelmed by their sensual pleasures and are subjugated by their carnal desires and habits. And they give no importance to this matter at all, nor do they attempt to make it their basis. But on the contrary, they turn away from worship and instead preoccupy themselves with their carnal desires. So they abandon it and instead dedicate themselves to their worldly pursuits. And they do not prevent themselves in order to make up for the time that they have squandered. So, in their ignorance and oppression, they are confused with their soul's desires. They are diverted from being devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Concerning their Lord's remembrance, they are heedless. In their religious practices, they are remiss. And in the drunken love of their habits, they blindly wander. It's mentioned that those who forget Allah, so he caused them to forget their own selves. Such are the corrupt ones, which is mentioned in Al-Hashr, Surah 59, ayat 19. And none take heed of this dire neglect and this enormous calamity except for the few who possess intelligence and nobility. They realize that their greatest loss lies in being preoccupied with that which produces nothing for its doer except perdition and misery. Therefore, they prefer the perfect to the imperfect, and they trade the ephemeral for the eternal. And they bear the burden of legal responsibility, taklif, and worship until it becomes a source of delight for them and a part of their very nature by which they become leaders. So listen attentively to their description and seek the help of Allah in adorning yourself with their traits. So then we have the aspiration, first and foremost. So fortunate are those who avoid the destructive paths, intending the stations of Allah's good pleasure. So this is the foundation of their path and the principal course of their party, in that they avoid the paths of spiritual loss and anguish and attend the paths of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's good pleasure. Quick reminder that in the I believe it's Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, the first books that are mentioned there in regards for the hadiths there, the first ones that is mentioned is regarding the intention, that one will have the reward of one's intention. So first and foremost, we need to have that intention of wanting to reach the station, being self-analytical and understanding that without that intention first, there's not a means to achieve it. So they avoid the paths of Satan and intend to be worshippers of the most merciful. So they avoid the paths of the blazing fire and intend the paths of eternal bliss. They abandon evil and do good. They keep their hearts, their tongues, and their limbs away from the prohibited and repugnant actions, and instead busy themselves with the obligatory and praiseworthy actions. And they adorn themselves with beautiful character, and they purge themselves of all reprehensible traits. Next is the station of sincerity, those who journey with the utmost sincerity, following the legislation by which faith is measured. So these two principles, sincerity, ikhlas, and conformity, mutaba'ah, are a prerequisite for every act of worship, whether it is inward or outward, to be valid. Every act that is not done intending the face of Allah is futile, and every act that does not conform to the sunnah of Allah's Messenger sallam, is rejected. And there's a footnote here regarding this, inshallah, that mentions that Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, said in Madrij al-Salikin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, He who created death and life to test which of you are best in action. Surah Al-Mulk, Surah 67, Ayat 2. Fadiyal ibn Iyad said about this verse, it is what is most sincere and most correct. And they asked, O Abu Ali, what is most sincere and most correct? And he replied, stating, an action, if it is sincere but not correct, will not be accepted. If it is correct but not sincere, it will also not be accepted until it is both sincere and correct. Sincere meaning that it is exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and correct means that it conforms to the sunnah. And it's only when an action combines that, bear with me, combines sincerity. It is only when an action combines sincerity for the one being worshipped, that which means intending to seek the face of Allah when performing the action in conformity with the messenger by doing those actions that have been prescribed and legislated, that an action becomes acceptable. And on that footnote as well, it is mentioned here that Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, said in Madrid al-Salikin, again, it has been said sincerity is to forget the creation seeing you because of continually looking towards the Creator. Whoever adorns himself for the people with what he does not possess has fallen from Allah's grace. And from the words of Fodial are leaving an action for people's sake is ostentation, riyah, whereas doing an action for people's sake is shirk. Sincerity is where Allah saves you from both of these. And Al Junayd said, sincerity is a secret, a sir, between Allah and His servant, which not even the angel knows as to record it, nor does Satan know as to corrupt it, nor is the desire, the hawa, aware of it so as to influence it. It was said to Sahal, what is the hardest thing upon the ego, the nafs? And he replied, saying, sincerity, because the ego has no share of it. And Imam Ibn Qayyim said about conformity to the master of the spiritual faction, Sayyid al-Ta'if, and their sheikh, al-Junayd ibn Muhammad, may Allah have mercy upon him, said, the paths of all of them are closed to the creation except for the one who emulates the footsteps of the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He also said, whoever does not memorize the Quran nor record the Hadith should not be followed in this matter because our science is confined to the book and to the Sunnah. And Abu Sulaiman al-Durrani, may Allah have mercy upon him, said, indeed, a word of wisdom occurs to my heart as it does to the nation of the righteous, but I do not accept it until it is supported by two, just witness, the book and the Sunnah, the book referring to, of course, the Quran. Next is the station of fear and of hope. The third line being those who build the stations of their journey being between being fearful and being hopeful. As we may have referenced this quote, very similar to the two wings of the bird, one being held up by hope and one being held up by fear. Meaning that their journey, they attach themselves to reverential fear, khawf, and hope, raja, in all their affairs clinging to them. They do this by inspecting their own faults regarding the fulfillment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rights, which induces fear in them, and by reflecting upon Allah's bounties and kindness upon them, which instills hope in them. And it's mentioned in the footnote here that Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, said that the heart in its journey to Allah, majestic as He, is that like of a bird. Love is its head, and fear and hope are its two wings. And when the head and two wings are sound, the bird flies gracefully. If the head is severed, the bird dies. And if the bird loses one of its wings, it then becomes a target for every hunter or predator. Again, that is, love is its head, and fear and hope are its two wings. And they reflect over Allah's attributes of greatness, magnificent, wisdom, and justice, which induces fear in them, and they reflect upon the divine attributes of mercy, munificence, generosity, and kindness, having hope in what they necessitate. So when they do an act of goodness, they combine between having fear and hope, hoping for its acceptance, but fearing that it will be rejected. If they do an act of evil, they fear being punished, but hope in being forgiven by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Between fear and hope, they fluctuate. To them, they constantly turn to seek shelter, and from them the affairs of their journey alternate. Indeed, they are the ones who succeed with flying colors, which matches well with the mentioning. They are the ones who are victorious. The footnote here mentions that Ibn al-Qayyim had said, whilst explaining the distinction between true hope and mere wishful thinking, tamani, is the difference between it and mere wishful thinking is that mere wishful thinking involves laziness, wherein the person neither exerts himself nor strives to achieve what he wishes for. Hope, however, entails striving, exertion, and beautiful reliance. The first one is like the one who wishes that the earth would plant and sow its own seeds for him. The second is like the one who will actually till the soil, plant the seeds, and then hopes that the crops will grow. And this is why the Gnostics, the Rifun, are agreed that hope is not correct except if accompanied first by action. Sheikh al-Kiramani said the sign of sound hope is good obedience, and hope is of three types. Two are praiseworthy, and one is blameworthy and mere delusion. The first two are the hope of a person who does an act of obedience for Allah upon a light from Allah, hoping in its reward, and like someone who commits a sin, then repents from it, hoping for Allah's forgiveness, pardon, kindness, magnanimity, clemency, and generosity. And the third type is like a person who persists in sinning and transgressing the limits, yet hopes for Allah's mercy without doing any action to warrant it. This is delusion, mere wishful thinking, and false hope. Next is the station of love, verse 4. Those whose hearts the divine has filled with devotion to him and love for the most merciful. This station is the station of love. Morhaba is the bedrock of all stations. From it springs every righteous actions, all beneficial deeds, and all of the lofty stations. And the footnote here mentions that Ibn al-Qayyim said that it is the station for which the competitors compete. To it do the workers fix their gaze for reaching its mark? Do the forerunners strive? Upon it do the lovers annihilate themselves? And with its refreshing breeze do the worshippers revive themselves? It is the heart's strength, the soul's nourishment, and the eye's splendor. So love refers to the heart being attached to the beloved such that it needs this love and cannot do without it. This requires that the lover withhold all from that the beloved detest and hasten towards all that the beloved is pleased with, doing it so readily, willingly, and eagerly. And if he speaks for Allah. If he remains silent, he does so for Allah. If he moves, it is for Allah. If he remains still, it is for him. This love then gives rise to a yearning and a restlessness for Allah, such that the lover never feels settled unless in his devotion. And if it is said, does love, which is the highest station, have any causes or means leading to it? It is said in reply that Allah has not made anything that is sought after, except that He has also made causes and means by which it can be acquired. So, from the greatest of these causes and means are withholding from any statement, action, or thought, so that will sever you from it, increasing in remembrance of Allah with presence of heart, reflecting upon his noble word, acknowledging the tremendous bounties that Allah has bestowed upon the servant, standing before him with presence of heart and due etiquette, attending the gatherings of the lovers of Allah, and turning away from whatever will cut you off from any of this. And whoever does this will attain the love of Allah, if Allah wills, and it is his aid that is sought. And the footnote here, number 6, mentioning that after mentioning 29 sayings from the Gnostics concerning the definition of love, Ibn al-Qayyim had then said that the 13th, which is the most comprehensive of what has been said concerning it, Abu Bakr al-Khatani said the topic of love was discussed. May Allah be exalted, elevated, during the pilgrimage season, and all the sheikhs were speaking about it. Al-Junayd was the youngest of them. He said to them, O Iraqi, share with us what you know. So Al-Junayd lowered his head and his eyes filled with tears. He said, there is a servant who has left his own soul behind, who is attached to his Lord's remembrance, who is steadfast in fulfilling his rights, who looks to him with his heart burning with the lights of his divine awe. Allah has purified the draught that he has drunk from the cup of his divine love, and the Almighty has raised for him the veils of the unseen. When he talks, it is for the sake of Allah, and when he utters, it is about Allah. When he moves, it is by the command of Allah. When he is at rest, it is with Allah. He is for Allah, by Allah, with Allah. The sheikhs all wept and said, what more can be added to this? May Allah reward you, O crown of the Gnostics. So next is the station of remembrance, line 5. Those who remember him and do so abundantly in private, public, and at all time in continuance. So this is the noble station which each person is in need of. Indeed, it is a need which ranks above all other needs. The remembrance or the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the edifice of one's time. By it, grief, anxiety, and distress can be dispelled. With it, joy and happiness can be obtained. It cultivates barren hearts, makes healthy hearts resplendent, and it leads to the loftiest of stations. And in it are benefits and virtues that cannot be enumerated. Allah the Exalted has said, Surah Al-Adhab, Surah 33, Ayat 41 to 42. O you who believe, remember Allah abundantly and glorify Him morning and evening. And the Prophet ﷺ advised a man who asked, the duties of Islam are many for me, so instruct me. And he replied, so Islam is saying, never let your tongue cease to be moist with the remembrance of Allah. As mentioned in At-Tirmidhi 3375. Isa had also said that the loners, the Faridun, lead the way. And we had asked, saying, who are the loners? I'm sorry, the loners lead the way. And we asked who are the loners. He, Sallallahu replied, those men and women who remember Allah abundantly. Which is mentioned in Muslim 2676. So I composed the following lines of poetry, which are as followed. Be one who remembers Allah under all conditions, for the remembrance of Allah has no time restrictions. The remembrance of the deity in public and in private and public will remove your anxiety and grief and expel it, procuring both religious and worldly excellence, driving away evil whisperings at their occurrence. The chosen one informed his companions one day. Abundant remembrance is why the loners led the way. To seek Allah's aid was Muadda's given legacy. So as to remember, thank, and worship him beautifully. He advised a person who sought sincere counsel, who was striving hard to carry out laws legal, that let your tongue remain most with it. This will aid every matter and facilitate it. He had informed that dhikr is a plant for its people, cultivating gardens eternal and abodes perpetual. He informed that Allah mentions his servant and is with him in all matters, facilitating it. If dhikr had no virtue, fine, except being a path to loving the divine, stopping the youth from backbiting and tale carrying, and from uttering that which corrupts their well-being, a great acquisition and an incentive would be to engage in Allah's dhikr abundantly, but due to our ignorance, our dhikr is rare, just as our worship of the deity is rare. And the dhikr of Allah is a light and nur for the one remembering Allah in his heart, speech, grave, and on the day of resurrection. And Allah's aid is sought. And it's mentioned in the footnote here, Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, said in Al-Wabil al-Sayyib, I heard Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah sanctify his soul, say, dhikr is to the heart as water is to a fish. See what happens to a fish when it is taken out of water. I once attended the morning Fajr prayer with Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, after which he sat down and engaged in dhikr of Allah until it was almost midday. Then he turned to me and said, this is my morning meal. If I do not partake of it, my strength diminishes. SubhanAllah. Next is seeking the nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verse 6. Performing these acts seeking nearness to the sovereign master by obeying him and by forsaking disobedience. So performing these acts of obedience, especially the obligatory ones and leaving the sinful one, draws one closer to Allah and leads to him in the sacred tradition, Hadith Qudsi, where it states that my servant does not draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than the obligatory duties that I have enjoined upon him. Enjoined upon him. My servant continues to draw closer to me by performing optional deeds until I love him, which is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari 6502. And due to this, I had said that next is self-inspection. So doing what is obligatory and optional is their way, inspecting their own faults and their deficiencies. So fulfilling the obligatory duties and increasing and performing optional deeds, along with seeing oneself as being deficient or excessive, is from perfection. So striving to do good actions eliminates indolence and laziness from oneself, whereas inspecting one's deficiencies dispels the ego's self-contempt, which corrupts actions and renders them futile. And Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, said, I heard Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah sanctify his soul, saying, the Gnostic sees himself as having no right over anyone, nor deems himself as being more virtuous than anyone. This is why he does not reproach, demand, or harm. Next is the stations of patience, will be the last one before we go to reflections and the group discussion for the Zoom meeting. Verse 8, their souls patiently enduring all that is disdainful, disastrous of what entails of divine benevolence. So patient perseverance, sabr, is restraining the soul from what it finds disdainful. When doing so entails the pleasure of the most merciful. Patient perseverance is of three different types in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that it may be fulfilled, patiently persevering with disobedience, so that it may be abandoned, and patiently persevering with regards to the hardships that Allah decrees, not showing any impertinence towards it. And when the soul feels lazy about obeying Allah, one exhorts and enjoins it to do so, as well as encouraging it by reminders of the rewards of what is entailed. So when the soul is strong in inviting towards disobedience to Allah, one restrains and warns it from doing so and reminds it about the punishment for disobedience, and patient perseverance is needed in all of these sorts of affairs. And last footnote here, as for complaining in times of adversity, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim said that the ignorant one complains about Allah to the people. This is the height of ignorance in complaining, and in whom the complaint is about. For if a person were to truly know his Lord, he would never complain of him. If he truly knew people, he would never complain to them. The Gnostic complains only to Allah, and the most knowledgeable of the Gnostics are those who complain to Allah about themselves, not about others. So there are three levels. First, being the most contemptible of them, is to complain to the people about Allah. The loftiest of them is to complain to Allah about oneself, and the middle level is to complain to Allah about others. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us and guide us and allow us to reach these states of which will increase us, reach the levels of ihsan, increases in our means of sincerity, devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have our deeds accepted, and make us amongst the forerunners, or those whose deeds are accepted on the day of judgment, and allow us to reach the means of paradise. Ameen. With that, we're coming to the end for today's reading. Inshallah, we'll continue and probably reach the end for in the upcoming week. If there's any good reflections or anything that anyone would like to post, please leave them in the comments below. We'd love to see you, and please join us for the discussion in the Zoom meeting if you are watching the live stream now. But with that, we'll go ahead and close. Allahumma subhanahu wa bihamdi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.